Siege on Ruby Ridge. On a crisp fall day in 1983, the air in Idaho was thick with the scent of pine and earth. Randy and Vicki Weaver stood at the edge of their 20-acre dream on Ruby Ridge. The mountains loomed large against the fading sunlight, embodying the isolation and freedom they yearned for. Their 4 children played in the distance, laughter mingling with the rustling leaves, a sound that filled the Weavers' hearts with hope. "It's perfect, isn't it?" Vicki mused, brushing her fingers across the rough bark of a nearby tree. "Just look at the mountains, Randy. They're untouched, like a promise waiting to be fulfilled." Randy looked at his wife, her eyes shining with certainty. "This place is our sanctuary, Vicki. We can finally build a life away from all that noise." He gestured broadly, encompassing the wilderness around them. No more corruption, no more city worries. Just us and the mountains. Their laughter rang through the crisp air. The joy of early family life echoed among the trees. In the distance, their children, Sarah, Rachel, and baby Elisheba, played in the tall grass, their carefree giggles merging with the gentle sounds of nature. It was a blissful sight. "Mom, look!" Sarah shouted, waving her arms excitedly as she spotted a deer in the distance. "Can I go closer?" "Be careful," Vicki called back. "Remember what we talked about, respect for nature." "No worries, Mom. I'll be quiet as a mouse." Sarah giggled and began to creep closer to the deer, a vision of determination in her small frame. As the children scampered off, Vicki turned back to Randy, her expression shifting to something more grave. "What if they come looking for us, Randy? You know how the world is turning." Randy's smile faltered, his previous lightheartedness diminishing. The weight of her words hung in the air like an ominous cloud. "What do you mean?" he asked, trying to dismiss a dawning sense of dread that crept over him. "Those people, the government," she replied, locking her gaze on his, searching for transparency in his thoughts. "They don't take kindly to folks like us. There are rumors about them watching, lurking. I just don't want to live in fear." A sense of unease washed over him. "We're safe here. We can grow our food, homeschool our children. This is where we're meant to be." He desperately tried to reassure both her and himself, her worries echoing deeper within him than he wanted to admit. But deep down, whispers of doubt resonated, mingling with apprehensions he preferred to suppress. What if they did come? What would they give up to make this sanctuary safe? As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows through the trees, they set to work. Hammering nails into wood, they sculpted their dreams into a sturdy cabin. Each swing of the hammer, each log laid felt like forging a legacy, a promise that once built could not be taken away. Randy paused for a moment, taking in the pulse of the land. "What if they see this place as a threat?" he asked, the question falling from his lips more serious than he intended. Vicki looked at him, worry clouding her bright smile for an instant. "Then we stay strong together. We fight for our right to live how we choose," she replied firmly. "We won't back down." Just as they continued their labor, the light from the setting sun cast a golden aura around them, nurturing the hope they held in their hearts. It was, after all, a pivotal moment in their lives, the beginning of their new chapter, even if they couldn't foresee the challenges ahead. Kevin Harris, born in 1961, grew up in the rugged landscapes of Idaho, shaped by a childhood that revolved around nature and independence. He was raised in a family that upheld self-sufficiency as a way of life, instilling in him a fierce love for the land and the hunt. Kevin was taught to appreciate the land's gifts, experiencing firsthand the connections fostered through the natural world. "Everything you see," his father would say with pride, "is a gift. Treat it like one." These words resonated deeply within Kevin, forming the cornerstone of his identity. As a child, he wandered the forests, climbed jagged hills, and relished adventures with eager spirit. Hours turned into days spent exploring, and he frequently returned home muddy and worn, excitement radiating from his wide grin. Each scraped knee and sore muscle became a badge of honor, a testament to his resilience and unwavering connection to the wild. "Why can't we just stay out here forever?" he'd ask during family outings, the flicker of campfire light casting shadows against his youthful gaze. His father would laugh softly, the warm glow reflecting in his eyes. "We can't escape the world forever, son, but we can learn to appreciate it, to live with it." However, life took a turn when Kevin entered adolescence. As the 1970s crested into the economically strained 1980s, he watched with growing disillusionment as the world around him shifted. The government became increasingly involved in personal lives, regulations tightened, and a loss of freedoms seeped into everyday reality. Kevin felt the tight grip of the system stifling him, like chains wrapping around his spirit. After a brief stint in the military, where he learned discipline but lost much of the innocence he held dear, Kevin emerged embittered. He felt betrayed by the promise of service, decrying the very essence of what he once honored, often vocalizing, "This isn't what I signed up for," as he shared drinks with friends at the bar. Disenchanted, he sought solace in the embrace of the wild, yearning for an existence free from societal impositions. It was during this tumultuous period that he stumbled upon the Weavers, a family seeking the same distance from society he longed for. As he joined them on Ruby Ridge, a feeling of kinship bloomed. One evening, under a tapestry of stars, he sat around the campfire with Randy and other like-minded individuals, sharing visions and fears of the future. "I've had enough of their rules," Randy declared, his voice resolute and filled with passion. "Out here, we make our own." Kevin felt a spark ignite within him. Here was a man who embodied the principles he had sought since childhood, a defiance against injustices that seemed ready to consume freedom. "Together, we can create something that shows them we won't be shackled," Kevin declared, his voice carrying the weight of shared conviction. This sense of unity kindled dreams of living off-grid, a movement of sorts, an escape from society's constraints. The Weavers had found a place where they could carve out a life based on their beliefs, and Kevin yearned to join this new family, filled with dreams of freedom and the chance to raise a family in an untainted environment. In 1984, he made his decision. He would abandon the complexities of a world he no longer understood, embracing a life governed by nature's laws. A life cultivated under the stars, where freedom thrived, and where the echoes of a brighter future awaited him. Unbeknownst to them all, this decision would intertwine their fates, leading not only toward the ideals they sought, but also thrusting them into a standoff that would test the very core of their beliefs and unravel the fabric of their lives forever. As Kevin Harris settled into life with the Weavers at Ruby Ridge, a circle of unease grew around them, drawing the attention of local authorities. Randy's worries were compounded by the remnants of old grievances. They hung over him like a heavy mist, fueling his unshakable fear. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains and shadows enveloped the cozy cabin, Randy sat around the fire with Kevin, discussing the changing winds of their lives. "I'm telling you, they're talking," Randy voiced, his brow creased with anxiety. "Neighbors see us building this place and think we're up to something." "What's so threatening about living off the land?" Kevin asked, stirring the fire with a stick. "Living off the land, maybe," Randy replied, his tone strained. "But there are rumors that we're extremists, that I've got a stash of weapons. The last thing we need is someone poking around asking questions." Kevin leaned back, contemplating the weight of Randy's concerns. "Have you considered reaching out to them? Maybe we can clear the air. If they're acting on rumors, maybe honest conversation can help." Randy shook his head firmly. "No way. Trust me on this, Kevin. The more we engage, the more they'll see us as a threat, not just neighbors, and I'd rather be seen as a recluse than a target." Unbeknownst to the Weavers, discussions were already unfolding in the local ATF and police precinct. In a dimly lit conference room during a heated meeting, agents gathered, poring over reports about the Weavers. Agent Art Roderick, a lead investigator, leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, brows knitted with concern. "All right, everyone, we need to assess the situation with the Weavers on Ruby Ridge," Roderick began, the gravity of it all weighing heavily on him. We've got reports coming in that Randy Weaver has been associated with known extremists. This has escalated beyond just red flags. We cannot let it go unchecked. Agent Larry Cooper leaned in, his voice steady yet urgent. You're telling us this guy has connections to anti-government groups? We've seen what these kinds of people are capable of. Just look at the Aryan nations. It's a cesspool of hate. Roderick's face hardened. Exactly. We must proceed with caution. We can't approach this as a regular case. We need to be prepared for resistance. Their ideologies make them dangerous. Agent William Deegan, a seasoned marshal, frowned. You mean to suggest storming in? That's not how we handle these situations, Art. We don't want to inflame tensions needlessly. At this, Roderick nodded thoughtfully. You're right, but we can't ignore the threats either. Remember, they've got firearms. We need to surveil the property first, monitor their movements. We'll gather intel before we decide how to act. The conversation shifted as they began dissecting Randy's history, examining various reports swirling like dust in the air. He sold sawed-off shotguns to an informant under false pretenses. He was supposed to be cooperating, and instead he fled, an agent detailed, a disease of belief spreading through the room. Cooper interjected, He didn't flee. He stopped trusting the government. I wouldn't be surprised if he thinks there's a conspiracy working against him. People like him can be volatile. Roderick pressed forward. And that's what makes him dangerous. We need a plan. We can't just wait until he decides to lash out. A conflict ignites. The tension that built in the Weavers' home came to boiling point amid mounting misunderstandings. August arrived, so thick with heat and uncertain air, yet radiating with palpable tension always felt. One weekday afternoon, as Randy prepared for an impending confrontation, he gathered his family for a crucial meeting. Listen up. We need to know what's going on with us, and we need to stick together, he said, pacing their small but cherished living room, anxiety etched across his features. Who's coming? Asked Sarah, her innocence still residing in her childlike wonder as confusion rippled through her voice. The government! Randy shouted, his voice raw with frustration and pain. They're going to try to take us. We need to be ready, armed and united. Dad, that sounds crazy, Rachel piped up, her wide-eyed expression darting nervously across each face. We haven't done anything wrong. Exactly, that's why they will come, he said firmly, slamming his hand against the weathered table. Because they think we're a threat. Randy, yelling about it won't change anything. We need to be rational. We can't let fear run our lives. Vicki stepped forward, her tone sharper than usual. You don't understand, Randy shouted back, frustration dancing over his control. I've already seen what will happen if we just sit idle and wait. They want to make an example of us. The air thickened with apprehension and fear, and it was in this moment of complete uncertainty when Samuel burst through the door, breathless and wide-eyed, his youthful face bearing a mask of terror. Dad, they're here. I saw them out by the logging road, Samuel blurted, his heart racing. Who? Randy shot back, adrenaline sharpening his senses. U.S. Marshals, Samuel exclaimed, eyes wide with disbelief. They were dressed like soldiers, dressed for war. Panic surged through Randy, but also a hardened resolve. Everyone inside, now. The children ducked and darted toward safety, confusion mingling with fear. Vicki ushered them into the cabin, gripping them possessively, the weight of incoming chaos looming larger than ever. Time felt like molasses as Randy and Kevin prepared for the storm, a storm that was now inevitable. Grab the guns, Randy commanded to Kevin as he barricaded the door, adrenaline rushing through his veins. Randy, this isn't right, Kevin pleaded, hesitation gripping him like a vice. We can't just fight. What about the kids? With the chill of impending violence thick in the air, Randy scowled, determination etched across his face. It's too late for that, Kevin. They've brought this upon themselves. Randy positioned himself at a window, scanning the tree line, heart pounding. They think they can take our home? These mountains are ours. At dawn on August 21st, the calm of the early morning shattered under the deafening sound of boots crunching gravel and heavy vehicles rumbling down the rural dirt road leading to the weaver's cabin. The outside world encroached on the sanctity of their home, and the weavers had begun their day as if it were like any other. They were blissfully unaware of the chaos approaching. Vicki stood in the kitchen, catching glimpses of her daughters, a momentary breath of normalcy amid brewing storms. "Breakfast is almost ready, girls. Help me set the table," she called out, but her heart felt heavy, sensing the tensions closing in. Meanwhile, Randy sat outside, sipping a cup of coffee as he checked his rifle, its weight a familiar comfort. Yet unease gnawed at him as shadows lengthened ominously around their protected space. Suddenly, without warning, a series of loud knocks pounded against their cabin door, jolting the family to stunning silence. Panic soared as Randy's body tensed instinctively. "U.S. Marshals, open up!" shouted a voice booming from outside. Randy's heart raced. It jerked in his chest. "What do they want?" Vicki gasped, turning to Randy, the horror settling on both their faces. "Stay inside, kids!" Randy barked, urging urgency. "Vicki, lock the door!" Just then, outside, Agent Art Roderick surveyed the perimeter with an eagle eye, glancing at his team to his right and left. "This is it," he said, the tension rolling off him like waves. "We need to approach with caution. Randy Weaver is known to be armed and uncooperative. Remember, we are not dealing with just any fugitive here." Agent William Deegan felt the weight of the responsibility settle heavily upon him. "What's our strategy?" he questioned. "We can't just charge in blindly and escalate the situation." Roderick narrowed his eyes. "We'll call out to him again. If there is no response, we take a reconnaissance approach, assess the situation, and then gauge when to breach." Inside the cabin, the panic and confusion escalated exponentially. "What do we do?" Samuel whispered, wide-eyed with terror as they huddled together. "Get down," Randy commanded firmly, his heart racing. "We're not letting them take us without a fight." Vicki clutched Elisheba tightly, eyes wide with fear. "Randy, this isn't what we wanted. We just wanted to live peacefully. Why are they doing this?" Outside, an ominous voice echoed through the trees. "This is your last warning. Randy Weaver, open the door now." The silence inside was heavy and suffocating, punctuated only by the sound of shifting bodies. Randy exchanged glances with Vicki, noting the fear swirling in her features. "Are we prepared for this?" she asked quietly, her voice trembling with unease. "Prepared as we can be," he whispered back, hopeless determination thickening the air. Outside, chaos would soon cross their threshold. "We've got visual on the property," Roderick barked into his radio, voice steady despite the chaos around him. "Everyone stay alert. He's likely armed and may not go quietly." Agent Cooper's voice crackled through the radio. "Let's be humane here. I recommend we don't engage unless absolutely necessary." Roderick arched an eyebrow, his tone sharpened. "And what if he starts shooting? We cannot allow this to escalate, not when children are involved." Kevin leaned closer to Randy. "What do we do? Should we try to talk to them?" Randy flicked his gaze to Kevin, anger mingled with fear. "Is talking going to save our lives? They've already shown they won't hesitate to use force." The air grew heavy with tension as the standoff officially commenced. Moments turned into hours, yet the Weavers remained barricaded within their home, engulfed in uncertainty and fear. Outside, the marshals organized, prepared to make their presence felt. Roderick convened his team, carefully assessed that they remained in control. "We know they're in there, and we know they're armed," he said, pacing in front of his assembled group. "But we also know that there are children inside. We can't afford an all-out assault that would have irreversible consequences." Agent Cooper nodded, his brow creased with concern. "What's our next move? Waiting indefinitely could trigger more paranoia." Roderick clenched his jaw, considering their options. "We'll prepare to breach if we don't hear from them soon. We have to be ready for anything." Hours melted into silence, and the weather turned oppressive, the humid air thick with anticipation. Each member of the marshals felt time stretching endlessly before them, and finally, with visible determination, Roderick made the call. "All right, let's try to establish contact again. We'll attempt softer terms this time. Maybe we can reach them before this escalates into violence." In the cabin, Vicki held her children close, the chill of dread settling over them like the autumn air. "What if they come in?" Rachel whispered, her voice trembling while the gravity of their situation pressed down on her tiny frame. "We stand together. We'll fight for our family," Randy replied, a fierce resolve solidifying within him like stone. "They want to take everything from us. We will not give up without a fight." "Randy, we're outnumbered," Vicki implored, shaking her head. "This will end badly." "Stay silent, and no matter what happens, remember to stay together," Randy urged, the determination in his voice ringing like a battle cry. "They won't get us." As the tension grew by the moment, Roderick's voice echoed once more. "Randy Weaver, we know you're in there. We want to talk. We can resolve this without further violence. Just step outside peacefully and let's work something out." Only silence returned his words. The waiting resonated ominously. "We've exhausted negotiations. We're going to breach soon if there's no sign of surrender," he warned, his voice heavy with unyielding authority. As night settled like a heavy woolen blanket, the situation became unbearably tense. The Weavers remained confined, their fates entwined in a web of dread. All they could do was wait and wonder what was to come. "Randy, I'm terrified," Vicki's voice quavered as she glanced at their daughters, huddled close. "What if they burst in? What happens to us?" "I understand, Vicki. We'll hold on. We'll get through this together," he promised, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder, but fear resonated within him. Outside, the marshals prepared for escalation, agents catching breaths of anxious energy surrounding them. "Listen up. We need to establish a clear line here," Agent Roderick stated, urgency feeding his words. "This has become a critical situation, and if we don't act wisely, it could lead to dire consequences." "What's the next move?" someone asked, already bracing for the impending storm. "We must anticipate his reactions if he feels cornered." Roderick trailed off, the implications heavy in the air. The air grew heavy with tension as the standoff officially commenced at Ruby Ridge. Moments turned into hours, yet the Weavers remained barricaded within their home, engulfed in a suffocating fog of uncertainty and fear. Outside, the marshals organized, ready to make their presence felt. Roderick convened his team, taking a steadying breath as he assessed their control over the situation. "We know they're in there, and we know they're armed," he said, pacing in front of his assembled group. "But we also know that there are children inside. We can't afford an all-out assault that would have irreversible consequences." Agent Cooper nodded, concern etched on his brow. "What's our next move? Waiting indefinitely could trigger more paranoia." Roderick clenched his jaw, weighing their options. "We'll prepare to breach if we don't hear from them soon. We have to be ready for anything." Hours dragged on in silence, and the weather turned oppressive, the humid air thick with anticipation. Each member of the marshals felt time stretching endlessly before them. Finally, with steely resolve, Roderick issued the next command. "All right, let's try to establish contact again. We'll attempt softer terms this time. Maybe we can reach them before this escalates into violence." Inside the cabin, Vicki held her children close, the chill of dread wrapping around them like an invisible shroud. "What if they come in?" Rachel whispered, her voice trembling under the weight of their situation. "We stand together. We'll fight for our family," Randy replied, fierce resolve solidifying within him. "They want to take everything from us. We will not give up without a fight." "Randy, we're outnumbered," Vicki implored, shaking her head. "This will end badly." "Stay silent, and no matter what happens, remember to stay together," Randy urged, his voice ringing with determination. "They won't get us." As tension mounted, Roderick's voice echoed once more. "Randy Weaver, we know you're in there. We want to talk. We can resolve this without further violence. Just step outside peacefully and let's work something out." Silence hung in the air like a heavy fog. Then chaos erupted. The family dog, sensing the threat, bolted from the cabin, barking ferociously at the marshals. In a moment of panic, one of the agents shot the dog, its yelping cut short by a gunshot, triggering a wave of terror through the cabin. "No!" Samuel yelled from inside as he watched the beloved pet fall. Grief and anger surged through him. "Get away from my family!" He grabbed his rifle and rushed out, pulling the trigger in desperation. Gunfire erupted. Amidst the chaos, Kevin Harris followed Samuel, firing his weapon, killing Marshal Deegan, but he was soon shot in return as he attempted to retreat, collapsing to the ground in agony. Vicki holding the door open for Harris, children clinging to her legs, the weight of the situation pressing heavily upon her. In a heart-stopping moment, a shot rang out from a sniper's position. FBI sharpshooter Lon Horiuchi, allegedly mistaking the situation, fired without realizing Vicki stood just behind the door. "Vicki!" Randy cried out, horror gripping him as he watched his wife fall. The scene shattered with heartbreak as the woman he loved lay lifeless, a stark realization dawning upon him that their family was being torn apart in an unimaginable way. "Samuel!" Vicki had screamed just moments before as chaos erupted, and now all Randy could do was hold his daughters, helpless in the face of overwhelming loss. As the echoes of gunfire faded, the silence was punctuated by the heavy realization that they had lost everything. As days dragged into an agonizing standoff, fatigue settled heavily into the Weaver cabin. The weight of grief enveloped Randy after Vicki's death threatened to crush him entirely. In moments of clarity, yet burdened by sorrow, voices offered hope amid the chaos. Bo Gritz approached Randy outside, a voice of calm pulling him from the depths of despair. "Randy, I want to help," Gritz said, his calm demeanor breaking through the haze of heartbreak. "We need to talk. This doesn't have to end in devastation." "Help?" Randy's voice cracked, rage mingling with sadness. "They took my wife. What do you want me to do?" Gritz remained steady. "I get it, believe me, but the way we're going, it'll only lead to more loss. This madness." "Madness? They killed Vicki." Randy's voice broke, anger shaking him. "I know, but you have children to protect," Gritz pressed, showing deep empathy. "Work with me. Continuing this standoff will only break you further, Randy. It's time to think of the girls." As Randy struggled internally, whose voice echoed within him, the walls felt like they were closing in. Would giving up mean losing his spirit, what Vicki stood for? "What do you even offer?" he demanded, choking on frustration. "Safety for your daughters," Gritz replied earnestly. "A future without the weight of this tragedy hanging over them." Through nights of uneasy silence, time clicked dangerously close to a tipping point, a time for closure. Meanwhile, outside, Roderick conferred with his fellow agents, anxiously strategizing their next steps. As negotiations faltered, tensions threatened to boil. "We can't let fear take over our actions. They'll see it as a chance to strike back," Agent Cooper reminded, a tone of caution threading through his voice. "We need empathy here." Hours transformed into restless nights, the writing on the wall clear. Heavy with loss, the Weavers sat each day in agony, pondering their choices. The dreams they once held now felt fragile in their grieving hearts. After sleepless nights, Randy found the strength to approach Gritz. "I'll do it," he whispered, fatigue etched deeper into his face than before. "I'm ready to talk. You must promise me my girls are safe." "Absolutely, I'll keep my word," Gritz assured, a flicker of hope igniting. As he stepped outside, heart pounding with uncertainty, Randy's footsteps echoed against the cabin floor. The weight of every step felt monumental, the tension wrapping around him like a coil ready to snap. "Randy Weaver, you are under arrest," Roderick announced as Randy appeared, voice steady yet betraying a quiver of uncertainty. Nodding slowly, Randy observed the scene, his life's work, his dreams reduced to ashes. "I wanted to protect my family. I never wanted this," he murmured, vocalizing what stunned his heart. As they led him away, he glanced back at the cabin, a life filled with laughter and warmth trapped within its walls. "I hope they'll find peace," he whispered, tears brimming in his eyes. As he surrendered, he held close the memories, leaving the unshackled dreams behind, a future now written with uncertainty, laden with grief. After surrendering, the Weavers found themselves trapped in a new hell, public scrutiny. The media pounced on the story, framing them as radicals, villains in a narrative full of misinformation. "Did you fire any shots during the engagement?" the prosecutor asked Kevin in a packed courtroom, the air thick with unshakable tension and judgment. Kevin's heart raced, memories flooding back, the chaos, the noise, the fear. "I didn't shoot first," he declared, standing resolute before the opposition. Samuel was defending himself. He was a kid. With every day's testimony presented, many mothers wept softly from the back of the courtroom. "Is that your defense?" the prosecutor retorted bitterly. Kevin paused. A flurry of emotions crossed his face. "We were trying to protect our home. Those men attacked us on our land." Every day brought new challenges, and the weight of their lives rested on their shoulders, like an anchor thrown into turbulent waters. Opinions pressed in from every side. The courtroom felt less like a place that sought truth and more like a spotlight illuminating their failure in the eyes of the world. One particularly intense day emerged. The prosecution cast the Weavers' home as a fortified compound, creating an exaggerated narrative. "Your Honor, that's a hyperbole!" Randy shouted, frustration boiling over. The judge banged their gavel, demanding order, a stark reminder of the stakes at hand. "Why didn't you reach out? Why didn't you trust us?" Randy pressed the prosecutor, voice shaky but edged with conviction. "Your past tells us everything we need to know about you," the prosecutor replied coldly, shrugging off his questions. "You are a threat." As the jury adjourned for deliberation, a tense silence settled over the room. Randy turned to Kevin, fear strained in his voice. "What if they don't understand? What if they see us only as criminals?" "We must cling to hope," Kevin replied, though even he felt the apprehension curling around his heart. "We must believe that they'll see the truth." "For this to truly matter, we must fight to have our voices heard," Randy insisted, resolve bubbling slowly back to the surface. "I won't let it end here, not like this." The dust barely settled over Ruby Ridge when the world outside spun furiously. As Randy Weaver sat alone in a small room at the Ada County Jail, staring out the barred window, distant sounds of media helicopters buzzing reminded him of his family's fragility. The scrutiny and judgment looming overhead blurred every waking moment. "Randy?" A voice broke his introspection. His lawyer, Jerry Spence, stepped in with a folder full of papers. "We need to discuss your defense strategy for the upcoming civil suits and the media coverage. It's going to be an uphill battle." Randy turned to him, eyes weary with a world turned upside down. "What does it matter anymore? They've painted us as villains. How can we fight that perception?" Jerry took a seat, leaning forward, sincerity etched deeply onto his face. "You have to remember, this isn't just about the trial anymore. Your family's story resonates with a lot of people. You've become symbols of resistance for those who feel the government has overstepped its bounds." Randy stared at him, a mix of anger and despair boiling below the surface. "Symbols?" "Symbols of death and devastation." "My family is destroyed, Jerry. The cost was far too great." "Sure, but that pain can become a catalyst," Jerry pressed, showing unwavering resolve. "People deserve to understand what has happened. We can channel this suffering into action. There are many who would rally for you." "Advocacy for what? More violence? More chaos? I don't want my name to be a rallying cry for extremists," Randy argued back, shaking his head as doubts clawed inside him. "Then what do you want? To disappear? To let them walk all over you?" Jerry pushed gently, eyes focused with strength. "Your voice matters, Randy. What your family has endured could expose the dangers of government overreach and protect other families." "Damn it," Randy said, anguish breaking through the stoic facade. I didn't want this fight. I just wanted to be left alone. And that's exactly why you must fight, Jerry replied. For the right to be left alone. For every family who feels threatened by government's claws reaching out. Randy leaned back against the wall, staring blankly for a moment. I just want them back. I want my life back. A few weeks later, the trial began. The atmosphere within the courtroom thick with tension as reporters descended like vultures, ready to pick apart every word, every glance. Outside, loudspeakers blared accusations, painting him and his family with a brush of violence and incompetence. As he stood before the jury, his heart raced with dread. I want to make something clear, he articulated, voice slightly trembling. I never intended for any of this to happen. I just wanted to protect my family. The government, they came at us without understanding, without compassion. The prosecutor rose, glaring intently at him like a hawk assessing its prey. But you did shoot first, didn't you? Your actions initiated the violence. Yes, but not without reason, Randy replied, the simmering anger bubbling to the surface. They shot my dog first. They came onto my property like armed thugs, acting as if we were criminals instead of a family. The jury exchanged glances, the silence beneath the weight of voices clamoring for attention mixed with the sound of guilt. After a lengthy deliberation, the jury acquits Harris and Weaver of charges relating to the murder of Agent Deegan. Weaver is convicted on the minor charge of failing to appear in court on his 1991 weapons charge. Randy Weaver is sentenced to 18 months in prison. In the following weeks, the story became a national sensation, enveloping the nation in a heated debate. Some saw the Weavers as martyrs, while others branded them as extremists inviting the chaos upon themselves. Outside the courthouse, protests unraveled, blown up by social media as the streets became choked with voices clamoring for justice. Who's going to speak for them? A protester shouted into a megaphone, capturing the audience. Who's going to tell the Weavers' story? Randy watched the coverage from the claustrophobic small jail room, feeling a unique mixture of pride and vulnerability. The world outside buzzed with vigor while he remained isolated, every decision weighing him down like lead. After the trial culminated, life began to reconvene for the Weavers, though it was precariously laced with haunting memories. The aftermath of Ruby Ridge would linger like a bitter scent, defining their new life in ways they never anticipated. Randy and his daughters moved to Kalispell, Montana, seeking solace in anonymity. Yet even in the quiet newness, memories seeped through like cracks in a half-finished wall, demanding clarity and conversation. One evening, Randy gathered his daughters around the fireplace, the warm glow contrasting with the chill outside. I know things are different now, he began, his voice heavy but searching. But we're still a family and we have to stick together. Sarah, now a teenager, leaned forward, her eyes reflecting a mix of anger and sorrow. But Dad, what do we do? How can we move on? Randy paused, realizing the enormity of the question hanging in the atmosphere. We hold on to each other. We talk about what happened. We allow it to shape us without letting it destroy us. What about Mom? What about Sammy? Rachel interjected, tears pooling in her eyes. It feels like they're just gone. Yes, they are, Randy said, the crack in his voice revealing the grief he continually battled. But they're always with us. We keep their memories alive. That's our legacy. Sarah sat back, considering his words. But how? How do we do that? We live lives they would have been proud of, Randy asserted, his gaze resolute, piercing through the dim light. We find joy in the little things, fishing trips, camping under the stars, sharing stories. Their lives meant something, and we must honor that. Years passed, and as the stars twinkled above the cabin, the Weavers settled into a sense of newfound steadiness. As they gathered around the campfire, stories of Vicki and Sammy danced in the warm glow, laughter mixing with a tinge of sadness, wielding both joy and mourning as tools of healing. Dad, remember when you took us fishing? Rachel asked, her voice playful, igniting memories long tucked away. How could I forget? You caught that huge one and then slipped right in. Randy chuckled, basking in the reminiscence, warmth flooding his heart. And it smelled terrible. Sarah laughed, her joy filling the air, injecting their surroundings with lightness. The atmosphere sparkled as they relived joyful moments interwoven with their cherished memories, the burden of tragedy slowly lifting. It was a reconvening of resilience, a testament to their connection that defied the chaos of their past. "Let's keep their story alive," Randy spoke quietly, a deep conviction solidifying in his heart. "Let's never forget who they were and what they taught us. Together we are stronger." As the flames crackled amidst laughter and remembrance, the legacy of Ruby Ridge transformed into a tale of survival, resilience, and undying love. The Weavers would not stand alone in this world. They would carry the weight of their past into a hopeful future, one built on understanding, strength, and an enduring love that would echo through the time.